but here, I mean, that's why you're here. Yeah. It's in Missoula. Yeah, so we got to
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We don't have microphones this morning, which I think is probably a good thing for a variety of reasons. However, at some point, some of our panelists and some of the speakers today may not be as loud as I am. So you may want to move ever so slightly closer to the stage at some point, so those folks can project to you. In the meantime, I'll just stand here and be a windbag. My name's John Ingen. I'm fortunate enough to serve as mayor of the city of Missoula. It's my pleasure to spend a little time with you this morning to welcome you to this Prevention High School Dropout Summit. Lots of folks have put a lot of work into assembling the program today, and I think we all have an opportunity to make a change in our community, which is nothing short of fantastic. As I look around the room, I recognize a whole number of relentless do-gooders that I see occasionally around town, and some new do-gooders as well, and good for you. It's great to see you here. I think you'll hear about some good work and some real difficulties and challenges that we face in the community. But again, I think we've got enough smart people in the room that we can start to make a difference. Our friends at the Missoula Forum for Children and Youth, a coalition that works very hard on behalf of young people in our community, work together to bring this summit to fruition today. I'd certainly like to thank and acknowledge those folks, and you'll learn more about them later. You should all have a printed program that's available to you, and if you don't, please grab one so you can follow along. There's apparently a sing-along later in the day. We can talk about that as well. I'm going to ask, I know that there's one city council person in the room who knows where I am. The rest don't. I'm asking all of you not to tell them. Good, thank you. We have a number of folks to thank, some of whom are listed on your program. But we want to certainly acknowledge the good folks at the College of Technology, the Lifelong Learning Center at Dickinson School, Alternative High School at Willard, my alma mater, the good folks at the Human Resource Council and the Job Corps. As we talk about the challenges of preventing folks from leaving high school before they're graduated, I think it's important to consider all of the remarkable ramifications of that decision. And when you're 15 or 16 or 17, 18, in my case I wrapped up high school around 23, those decisions don't seem as important in some ways. They're immediate, they provide a short-term solution to what becomes a long-term struggle. And I think that's why we're here today, is to recognize the depth of that decision and help kids maybe make another choice. I had the good fortune to work with Ellie Greenwood, one of our organizers today, on a program that we borrowed from the mayor of Houston, Texas. I wrote a letter to all of the 9th graders at Hellgate High School this last fall, detailing my 8 years of high school and suggesting that it is early, isn't it? And we only had decaf, I understand. And asking those folks if there were any challenges they faced, any reasons that they thought they wouldn't be able to finish high school. And if that were the case, we gave them an option, some folks to contact to see if we could give them some help to take some additional steps and to better understand that decision. And we're hearing back from a few of those folks, and we hope to ratchet that up and hit every 9th grader in Missoula next year. So, and we've had some help from the University of Montana with that. I'd certainly like to get some help from the county commissioners, and I'm sure they would be willing to participate. So I think we're making some inroads, and we're trying some innovative things. I wanted to point out that Missoula is once again, for the 3rd year in a row, we've been named one of the 100 best communities for young people in the United States. That's a program of America's Promise. And that's because we reach out to children in all sorts of ways, whether we're providing educational opportunities, prevention programs, or programs as simple and elegant as a splash deck that simply requires you to hit a button and water comes out and you can play. This is a great place for families and kids. And that's because I think we have a strong sense of community, and we continue to cultivate that sense of community and nurture it. And as long as we're doing that, I think we have tremendous hope for our future and for the long-term good of Missoula. We have some essay contest winners. You'll note those folks in your program today, and you'll find a number of good things, including a postcard that we hope you'll fill out at the end of the day with your contact information, credit card numbers. No, that's not true. Contact information, and some indication as to whether you'd like to be involved in more activities as this program and others develop. If we know who you are and where you are and what your level of interest is, we can tap you as a resource and exploit you in the best way possible. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for thinking about that. And without further ado, we'll get our panel started this morning, and to take care of that piece of business is our friend, Ms. Mary Ann Moon. Good morning, Mary Ann.
Good morning. We'll see how other voices project. So if you can't hear in the back, look to the front. I guess that's the message, huh? You can give the mayor instructions, and he remembers 99% of them, but the one thing that we wanted to acknowledge this
We'd like to thank the Garden City String Quartet. Those are 4 young women from Washington School, and of course that note was written in my own handwriting, which is a terrible problem. My apologies, Mary Ann.
Not a problem, Mayor. You do really quite well most of the time, 99.9% of the time. So we're going to keep you.
Thank you very much.
This morning, I'm really pleased to be the moderator of an esteemed panel. I think that I'm going to have them introduce themselves, but I'll quickly tell you who they are. From your left to right is Gypsy Ray, who has been a mover and a shaker in our community, has created a place called Mountain Home for young women who are pregnant or parenting. To her left is Judge John Larson, who has done some wonderful work with drug court in our community and certainly has been involved with many adolescents in our community. To his left is Jesse Casterson. Jesse is one of our project success counselors with one of our grants to reduce alcohol abuse at Big Sky High School. He's a prevention specialist. And to his left is Cecil Crawford, who works with our students at Hellgate High School and has been there for about 10 years, so has lots of stories to tell us about high school students. So with that brief introduction, I'm going to start with Gypsy and have you tell a little bit more about yourself, Gypsy.
Hi, thank you for coming today. It's always exciting for me to see people that care this much about youth. And although my specialty is with teenage parents, at-risk youth really are what we're here to talk about today, and dropout. I'm the director of Mountain Home. It's a home for teenage mothers and their babies, and we actually started that program in 2000, so it's almost been 8 years, which is hard to believe. Prior to that, I worked for Word as a case manager with teenage parents who are often homeless, and most of them have dropped out of school. And that was from 1994 until 2000. So there's about 14 years of experience there working with teen moms, trying to help them navigate the system of school and prevent dropout. And I'll talk later about some of that. But one of the reasons we started Mountain Home was to provide the most basic needs to our teenage parents, but also to help them stay in school. And I'm going to talk in a little bit about some of those statistics that are probably not news to you, but are pretty staggering and pretty scary where teen parents are in the school world. So with that.
Thank you, Gypsy. Judge, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, my name is John Larson. I've been a trial judge here in Missoula for 15 years, and as a trial judge I work the whole range of cases from the very pleasant ones, which are adoptions, to the very stressful ones, which are felony criminal cases involving homicide and other violence to members of this community. I have, unlike most of you, didn't get any formal training in working with youth or child psychology. I was a history major. The point was brought home a couple nights ago when one of the other judges and myself were listening to the training that you get as a court-appointed special advocate for children in the child dependency system. They got 35 hours of training, those volunteers, and the judge next to me leaned over and said, "That's about 34 and a half hours more than I received." I was a little luckier as I was waiting to be sworn in. A new group was forming in Missoula to give children a voice in those proceedings. And as I've progressed throughout my 15 years, I found it very useful, very enlightening, and very uplifting to give the young people a voice in these proceedings that are in front of me, which are generally mostly negative. We worked in a treatment court setting to bring more positive results in this community without having to send kids out of town to fix them, because that frankly doesn't work. And that's where I've been centering most of my efforts, is in the community and trying to work with groups that many of you we've worked together or tried to work together to improve outcomes here in Missoula.
Thank you, Judge. Jesse, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thank you. Jesse Casterson. I work as a Project Success counselor at Big Sky High School. Project Success, fancy name for drug and alcohol counseling, prevention work, intervention, referral services. I piggyback with what a lot of you know as flagships. So Flagship is going to offer after-school activities, really a connection to kids in the schools. So we kind of work together a little bit more in the intervention and referral services on my part. Prevention strictly, well, and a lot of connection with Flagship. And, you know, I've been at Big Sky a year and a half, which isn't that long to be there, but I've already seen a lot of kids slip through the cracks. A lot of kids just come in and they start being real, and they're really frustrated with what's going on in there. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But see kids, and you invest them, and you invest in them, and you get resources to them, and they still just can't seem to commit to getting their diploma. And it's really disheartening to see kids that you know have the skills. A lot of the kids I see that drop out aren't lacking academic skill when they decide to fail and give up on high school and look at the resources they have. But the one thing I do know, you know, and every kid that has dropped out, I think every kid I've run into, every teenager says that they know a high school degree is important. So it's not, I don't think, educating young people that, oh, you need to get a high school degree to make it in the world today. I think it's a lot more than that, and we'll, I think, get to some of that as the morning progresses. Thanks.
Thank you, Jesse. Cecil?
Okay, my name is Cecil B. Crawford. I'm 5'8", Blackfeet, 3'8", starving artist. In Goma Katayo, Nitsitsi, I mean big cat with stripes and warts, or tiger woods. I'm supposed to talk about my investment and interest. I'm not a teacher, I'm a tutor. Actually, I'm a con man. I just try to get them to do their work any way I can. A long time ago, an elder told me, he said, the same pot of water that makes the carrot soft makes the egg hard. So there is not one thing you can do. They're individuals, and you have to treat them that way. I came here on a dream. I got out of the Army, I went back home. I said I'd never leave the reservation again. Everywhere I went, I was treated badly because of the color of my skin. Then I had a dream that I was teaching Native American students. That morning I got up and we came to school at the university. And I can't tell you about all the dropouts, but I can tell you about the ones at Hellgate. BC, there was a big dropout. BC is before Crawford. But last year, we had one freshman, one sophomore, and one junior. That's 4%. They're not numbers. I know these students. That's my investment in this.
lights, so you see perspiration dropping from us. I don't think it's about nervousness, it's about pure honest heat. Okay, we're going to do this popcorn style. I'm going to ask several questions. The panel has 4 minutes, and there is a timekeeper down here, panel, that Rachel Mayu will hold up a 1-minute sign when you have 1 minute left in your 4 minutes. And this is just in an effort to make things expedient and keep on schedule. So the first question is, please relay one story or incident that brought this topic close to your reality. This could possibly be one student you still think about, meet on the street, or in some way is in your life. This does not have to be a success story. You may want to address what you would do differently in retrospect.
I'll go.
Thanks, Susie.
I like to start. So for me, as I mentioned, teenage pregnancy is the issue that's near and dear to my heart. And when this question came up, we got to hear the questions ahead of time, and I immediately thought of one of the girls that lived at Mountain Home. We started Mountain Home again to meet those most basic of needs and to keep the kids in school. And I think about one of our girls who, I'd like you to imagine for a minute, 6:50 in the morning, having to get up, get a baby ready, get yourself ready, get on a school bus, and get to school, get that bus a block away and get to school when it's 10 below. And somehow walk into a school where you're not greeted with open arms, you're not greeted with love and support. What you're greeted with is some pretty crooked looks and lots of judgment. And we're very lucky in Missoula to have the Young Family Program at Sentinel, where there's a nursery on site and a parenting program and that kind of thing. It's amazing that we've had that program for over 20 years in Little Missoula, Montana. However, all of the social stigma that goes on in a high school is just devastating. And the 10-day rule applies for a teenage parent, so you can only miss 10 days of school. Your maternity leave is actually 10 days as well. So any of you who are parents and have had to experience trying to get up and get back to work 3 months later, imagine doing that in 10 days. That sets them up for failure. There's absolutely no doubt about it, in my opinion. Some of the statistics I'd like to share when I was thinking about this as well is what is the reality of our teenage parents and how are they doing? Well, I'll tell you that 98% of the pregnant and parenting young women that come into our program have dropped out of school. 98%. We have had, well, what that is over 150 girls have lived there. So about 3 of those girls were still in school when they came to Mountain Home. And our age that we serve is 14 to 19. These are kids who should be in school, who should not drop out, and in most cases it's illegal that they're actually out of school. That compares to 85% re-enrollment rate that we're able to affect by having them in the Mountain Home program, because education is a requirement of our program. So we were able to get 127 out of 150 back in school. That's huge, but that's only 6 girls that we're able to serve at any given time. And where are all the rest of them? They're living maybe in their home of origin, they may be in other programs, they may very well be on the street. I also talked with the Futures program, which is a program I used to work in where we do home visiting with both teen mothers and fathers. In their program, 75% of their applicants that come into their program have already dropped out of school. So as you can see, it's a very significant problem. High school dropout and teen pregnancy is linked. We need to do something about it, and we need to get those dropout rates obviously down, and we'll talk later about how I suggest we make that happen. Thank you.
If I could go next, about 12 or 13, well, let me go back to when I first became a judge. I started getting invited to a few meetings. One was about teenage drinking, and I went to that meeting, and there were folks from the school and the community there talking about how what a problem teenage drinking was. The sheriff was there, and he was amazed that I would come to such a meeting, and he and I forged a friendship and a coalition over the years, and I continue to have a good relationship with law enforcement in the area of teenage drinking. There is also a school meeting, and went to school, and they're talking about dropouts and keeping kids in school and how important that was. And maybe a year or 2 later, we had another community meeting, and we developed this treatment court concept. And key to the success of that treatment court concept was having the school connection. And I had the very good fortune to have Mary Ann serve on that first team. And she continually brought this information to our team as we work these kids in this treatment court every week. We staff them every week. And without that understanding of how the school works, what the options were, how school was changing, the fact that they were bringing in Willard, which came on board as an option, an alternative school, the interest when we were having the suicide and school violence issues, which haven't gone away, led to the Safe Schools Project. Again, that connection with the school and having the good fortune of having Mary Ann Moon interested in that and helping to bring me up to speed has kept me interested in this area and has kept me attuned to what's happening in school, because frankly, I can't do my job, keep these kids in this community or out of jail unless I have this excellent school connection, which I've developed over the years. And, there's no way that I can downplay it or say that I could have done it any other way without that school connection. They're vital. And so if we're going to take the next step and be more active and proactive in dropouts and truancy, this connection between school and the courts and the other players has to get stronger. And it's going to take some big meetings like this, and then it's going to take some little meetings where we actually decide what we're going to do and how we're going to do it.
Thank you, Judge. Trustee Lucifer?
Well, I looked at that question and I've really thought about that for a long time. It's been weeks. And the thing that got me caught up was the one story incident, and it's hard for me to determine which one to share with you. I can look back to my high school experience even, and watching friends and people I knew give up on the system and drop out, and have to maybe feel like the system gave up on them. I know stories, I went through my college experience, heard about younger friends and brothers and sisters of friends doing the same thing. Walk into my job, I did interns at both Willard Alternative School and Big Sky High School, and seeing kids do the same thing there. So I could talk about the kid that is a hands-on learner and didn't find anything appealing to him in high school and gave up on it. I could talk about the kid of color, who never really fit in, really felt stigmatized in school, and probably was, and who had no support at home. And he told me one time that, you're the only person that I think really believes that I can do this. And I know that's not the reality of the way it works in schools. I know almost every teacher and every administrator and every counselor in the school really believes in kids. But his perception told me a lot about how kids see things and the support that he is not getting at home. To realize that, not only in school, but everyone in my life doesn't believe that I can make this happen. That's a really big battle for this guy. But the one story that really is sticking to me the closest as of late is a student that I ran into last year. He's the kind of kid that'll just test the waters in the old drug and alcohol counselor's office, right? He'll come in and see if things are safe. And so I work under the rules of HIPAA, right? So I work under very strict confidentiality rules, which is kind of an impediment in how I can further address and help some of these students. Part of the question is, what can I do different in retrospect? Well, maybe had him sign some release forms and get connected with his family and with his teachers. He comes in last year, ends up dropping out, I believe, right about this time last year, under a month from now. All of a sudden, he got out of the court system that really tried to change him, made a lot of different changes in his life, made him recommitted to school, got him clean. He drops out, he gives up. One of those kids you don't ever hear from. You don't know what happened and how it happened and where he's at. Those are the most haunting stories. You don't know what happens to kids when they leave. What happens about a month after school starts, he knocks on my door. He's like, man, I've recommitted to it. I'm going to do this, dude. I'm going to do it. And he's like, I'm ready. And I realized I only have one chance to be in high school. I'm going to try again. And I realized that I think my drug use is impacting me. But he came to that awareness, and it rekindled in him a desire to be successful. So what happens? Right at the end of the last semester, he decides to drop out again. And just repeated failure. And in his grades, he was passing every class. His attendance was much better, and he still just didn't want to fight it anymore. And so really, what could I do different in retrospect? Really talk to this kid about, hey, is it okay if I talk to your teacher? Really try to find, have them encourage his strengths. Talk to his family. Hey, can I get a release form to talk to your parents, maybe meet with them? But that's a lot of effort to take for one kid. And for me to email every teacher that runs into every kid, that's on the risk for dropping out. It's a headache for me, and it's a lot of work for them. They got curriculum to worry about, and they're believing in kids. I know that. I know that teachers believe in kids, and they're swamped with what they need to do, and a couple kids slip through the cracks, too many of them. And if we're looking at an 80% graduation rate, we're looking at over 200 kids that don't finish on a regular basis. So he's the one that really is sticking with me now, and I wouldn't be surprised if this guy, same time next year, rolls back in high school. He's thinking about Job Corps. We're going to talk about why options like that are really good for some of these young people. But really, when I come down to one story, I guess that one sticks with me because it's the most recent, but it's definitely not the most telling or the only bad ending of any ones we've seen. Thanks.
I had 10 years of stories, so I just got a big jar at the house. I reached in and I'm going to tell you 162. A lot of people don't understand that Native Americans, when we come from the reservation, we go through a culture shock. It's a real thing. It'd be like if we sent you to inner city Chicago to go to school. It'd be different. You'd be different from everybody. Everywhere you go, people yell at you. You'd miss your friends. You'd miss your ceremony. I'm going to tell you about a student that came to Hellgate. His mom was doing drugs, so he got sent to live with his grandma. And he didn't like that. He was fighting, getting in trouble, skipping school. Just didn't look like he was going to graduate. And one day he was reading a newspaper and there was some negative stuff about Native Americans, which we always read. And if you tell somebody that they're bad, they're alcoholics, they're lazy, after a while they'll start believing that. And we could just give them something positive. So I told them, say I am somebody. And I said, say it like you mean it. I am somebody. The whole class said this. So I said, say it one more time like you mean it. They all stood up and said, I am somebody. Oh, it just gave me goosebumps. The next day he come in. I had his name. He was failing math. 76%. Under that, I am somebody. He graduated. He's going to a community college in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you. The themes I hear are sometimes it's trying to fit a round peg into a square hole. There's many, many home issues, poverty, those kinds of situations, unwed pregnancies, teen mothers, Native American racial issues, and really just a connection with the whole community as far as working together. And this is our first attempt formally at trying to make that a bigger picture. Thank you, panel members. The second question, I'm going to tie two questions together. So the question is, what is your opinion of the primary reason that students leave school? How can this be addressed by your school and or your community? And where's the gap in our community? What can we do next to hold up the standard? What's your advice for community intervention and our next steps? So again, popcorn style, whoever would like to start.
I still have 4 minutes.
How are we doing for time? So we
Okay,
have 10 minutes.
That's, wow, what an awesome question, and very stimulating in my brain. So, the primary reason, I could easily sit here and tell you that marijuana needs to drop out. Kids smoke a lot of pot, and they become motivated to smoke some more pot. And that's more or less it, a lot of the times. But how can kids smoke a lot of pot and still graduate? How can they smoke a lot of pot and get good grades? That happens. That there is a certain population that works with. So I look at a lot. I'm just trying to find one word to use. I guess, connection is a really big one that I see. I'm not going to toot my own horn, but being somebody that kids can connect with in a school and get them connected to a system, I think is really great. They feel like they're part of something. They feel like somebody believes in them. But I also look at, Howard Gardner, if anyone knows the idea of multiple intelligences, write that stuff down, do a Google search on it. It's great information. I think, Marianne said it, we're taking a square peg and stuffing it into a round hole with a lot of these kids. I think we're training a lot of our students to be college prep. And I don't know how that works with the 20% that doesn't graduate. I don't think they're committed to going to college. It's not their type of thing. And we look at a lot of linguistic intelligence and mathematical logical intelligence in schools. It's the way Nickleby works, No Child Left Behind. It's the way that we work as educators a lot of the time. And it works for a lot of students. It really does. But when you look at multiple intelligences, there's spatial intelligence, there's inter and interpersonal intelligence, okay? There's natural intelligence. There's all different things. I think everyone is good at something. And what we're trying to force kids, and the only way that they can get the grade in schools a lot of times is by using two different kinds of intelligence they might not be the best at. It's going to really isolate kids. They're going to push back from that. And so what do teenagers want more than anything in the world? I want choice over my life. Okay, you look at them when they're in their family, right? They start pushing away from adults. They start pushing away from their parents. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to listen to my peers. I want choice. Okay, I want to have a voice in what I want to do in my life. So you stick them in schools that say, here's how you get your grade. Okay, here's the book. You got to read Macbeth and write a paragraph and write an essay on it. That's how you get the grade. Dude, don't push me into that. I don't want to do that. It works for a lot of kids. They say, you know what, maybe that's not ideal. That's what I need to do to get the grade. They'll do it. For a lot of these students, that's not really what they're into. That's not going to work for them. So I think, there's a deeper issue of letting kids choose how they do things and giving them, and a lot of that I think is us as adults, letting go of our biases and saying, you know what, teens can do it. Young people have the intelligence and have the willpower and have the guts and have the creativity to come up with stuff that are in credits. And I'm going to really prop up Willard for a minute, Willard Alternative School, okay? They're taking in students and they graduate rates pretty similar to the rest of the schools. But you got to realize Willard's a school where kids have already dropped out of other schools. These are kids that are not making it in the public school system, and they go to Willard and they make it. How do they make it? Okay, connection. First and foremost, you got 10-to-1 ratio. Is that doable in public schools? Probably not. But I guess the answer, the question is, what are we lacking? We're lacking the opportunity for kids to be more connected, lower ratios. What else does Willard offer? A lot of independent study opportunities. Hey, you want to get a credit in government? Here's a plethora of different ways to do it. You look at your multiple intelligence list. You can present stuff under multiple intelligences. Okay, you can present in classrooms. And if it's going to make teachers a little more flexible, I think it's going to make them more interested in what they're doing anyway. If they're doing more than just lecturing, hey, read out this book. Okay, if they're able to present information in different formats and say, here are 5 different ways that you can learn and how you can get the credit on this report. Pick a way to do it. You got another idea? Come up to me. We can chat about it. What's that going to take? That's going to take a lot more effort by teachers, right? It's not as simple as sitting down and grading multiple choice tests. You can crank those out a lot quicker. You're looking at 4 or 5 different formats for grading. But I guess, again, the question is, what are we going to do? That's the big picture. And so when you get a kid, again, you get a kid who's not committed to school, they're not the ones that are able to make the choices in what class. Okay, I can take creative writing or I can take computers. Okay, that's a choice. But that is not within the framework of really how kids want to learn stuff. I go to computers and I hack on the computer all day. Can I do it differently? Can I develop this? Can I do that? A lot of times we're forcing them to do one thing or one or the other. Now, so you get one of those kids. You get a student that's not really committed to school. He's not connected. He or she is not connected to school. And then they start doing some drugs on top of that. Man, you didn't think they were motivated to begin with. Put marijuana in them on a daily basis, have them come to school with a hangover. That's bad, okay? These kids are going to start sliding really quickly. So that's the other gap, I think, is that last piece of being able to find a way to keep funding for Project Success, for Flagship, okay, for mental health services in the schools. It's just like an adult. If you're walking through your day and you're addicted to drugs and you're suffering from major depression, are you going to be successful in your job? No way, okay? But we're expecting, you got to realize a lot of these issues happen with young people, just like they do adults. Kids are walking through their world and they're hurting, and we don't have a lot of resources for them. Providing them with mental health services, providing them with drug and alcohol intervention, providing them with referral services, providing them with connection is going to take a lot of that burden away, and sometimes that's what they need. I mean, if you're severely depressed, you're not committed to school anyway, it's pretty easy to give up. You can pull some of those things away. So it's a very complex puzzle, and I guess I was supposed to say the one thing. I kind of went off on all that because I don't think there is really one answer, but I think there's a lot of different avenues we can take, especially by looking at the model that Willard takes on. And don't make Willard bigger. That's going to ruin the whole thing. So if we can maybe make 2 or 3 smaller, same like alternative options, what that's going to do is also reduce the caseload in our public schools, make more connection, make a lower ratio. So that's what I got. Thanks.
Thanks, Jesse, and I'll just put a plug in for Missoula County Public Schools here. I've been around a long time, way longer than I ever planned to be. And I think the difference that I see in schools is the fact that we are able to bring other services into the school front. There was a time when schools were pretty self-contained. You had your own psychologist, your own counselor. We pretty much took care of every student, or felt like we did. And I think that problems have broadened. I think that students come from many more problems. There's many more forces that impact their lives at this point. And I'd really like to give our school district credit for being able to partner with agencies and bring in services that recognize and deal with these specialties. So Jesse, I really agree with your comments about drug and alcohol abuse, all the other things that our students face today that I think are huge obstacles for them to be successful in a pretty long-standing, moderate school system that's very culturally embedded and difficult to change. Thank you.
I agree as well with the comments of Jesse. I want to say that when we deal with the most challenging kids in our system, we have to look beyond those kids though, and the research tells us, as well as our own experience tells us, that unless we deal with the family matters, we're not going to have much success. Because we can send them away in some idealistic situation, or maybe not a very idealistic situation, a very controlled situation, and they will do well there. And they'll get on athletic teams, they'll maybe get a graduation certificate, they may pay back their restitution. But when they come back home, they're still confronted with those same issues that were there that caused them to get in our system, to leave school, and to be sent away. So our challenge, and again my challenge, has been to try to figure out ways to engage the family more. Having the family there, a bunch of parents with a bunch of kids with similar issues, does create a different feeling in the courtroom. Having a parenting class after court that they're required to go to creates some more collegiality, exchange of information, and also exposes the depth of the issues and how complex the issues are at home. We learn that when we work with these kids more and their families more. So finding different ways to engage those families, and of course those young people who don't have a family are the most challenging. And trying to structure things in the community where they can identify with someone. In the courtroom, typically the judge is viewed as the most negative possible option, and he's generally portrayed that way throughout the system. If you don't do this, you're going to go see the judge. But giving those kids a voice, the ones who've been expelled, kicked out of their home, abused at home, never had seen any kind of success at all, giving them a voice in some setting is at least a step toward getting to that point where they can give progress. Mr. Crawford gives them, had them articulate that voice in the school. Last year, the American Bar Association, the largest legal organization, featured at-risk youth as their whole convention. and they had 23 of their 200 programs focused on at-risk youth. And their one theme is not about us, without us. Letting those kids say something. It was very shocking last month when I brought in a young person in a case, and well, this case is about them, but you know, we're going to be talking about this case and they're here. And I said, yes, you are. And it's a type of case where typically everything is closed and the children are never present. But giving that child a voice in her case and letting all the adults listen to that, I think is something we need to do more of. And certainly in my treatment court setting, the lawyers are usually shocked that I let the young people say what they say and be a little more frank with me than anyone would ever think of in a formal court proceeding. But we have to develop those relationships, we have to encourage those relationships, and they can come in different places. We really have to find out, though, the numbers. Jesse gave me a number. Last week we had a meeting about kids in detention. I know all 3 of mine in detention are out of school, can't stay in school, and we have a great school in detention, but we can't keep them there for long. So we really have to find out the numbers. We really have to find which types of kids are going at what time. I think the school district has those numbers. We need to ask some more questions about those numbers, and again, get in some real intense meetings about how we want to divide those up. One of the American Bar Association seminars was about truancy, and there are national models that are working. There's one that I think has some success east of here in Billings. So it's not that far away, and it's not that novel, and it's not that hard to do. But each one of the players is going to have to sit down at the table, and they're going to have to give up a little turf, have to agree to do something differently, such as what was done with Willard, and then take the next steps together, and you're going to make some mistakes. And we're going to be criticized, and I'm guilty of both of those. I'm not afraid to be criticized, I'm not afraid to do anything new, and I'm not afraid to work with people outside the city. So, and there are lots of folks here in this room, that's why you're all here. So I encourage those steps to begin, and I encourage them to be family focused.
Okay. Where to start? 1.5 minutes on teaching all these.
You should have a little more time, Cecil.
It's like teaching Native American studies in 45 minutes. Some of the things the students said were public school culture is boring. And also what a lot of people don't understand is there's a lot of cliques in the high school. You try to fit in, have the latest toys, the latest music, the latest everything. Just trying to fit in. Try add color of skin to them. That's very hard. Dysfunctional home life. Lack of parental support for education. If we could get the parents to more involved, we get more or less dropouts. There's substance abuse. Substance abuse, they're behind in credits. Sometimes when they get behind in credits, like there's a big amount, and you just defeated before you ever start. So if we just could chip away at those credits, they have a better chance. I always tell them, man got to the moon one step at a time. Racial tension and labeling. A lot of times our students are kicked out for defending themselves against prejudice. Nothing happens to the other student. The other student starts it. On our res, we fight readily. We defend ourselves. And this happens, the Indians kicked out. Pregnancy. Couldn't fit in. These are from the students. And what I say is large schools, uncaring teachers, passive teaching methods, irrelevant curriculum, inappropriate testing, again, lack of parental involvement. Culture shock is a real thing. Some people never get over it. Deaths and ceremonies. Our students miss a lot of school because there are a lot of deaths back home. When somebody dies on our reservation, they don't say, well, the funeral's at 4 o'clock. They lay them out for 4 or 5 days sometimes in a community center. And we go there and we pray and we visit and we talk about their lives. and it's just 24 hours a day. And then we bury them, and then we have a big feast. It isn't just that afternoon. And our ceremonies are very important. And they go on all the time. In transportation, a lot of our students have no way of getting to school. There are buses, and there are city buses, but sometimes it's just hard. If they were more involved in extracurricular activities, it gives them leadership, confidence. And some of the recommendations I have, if we had culture-based programs, like for music, if we had drumming and singing, and for art, if we could do beadwork, or any of our cultural arts, and language, if we could learn our own language, they would have pride. It would keep them in school. And if we hired teachers that understood we're Native Americans. One friend of mine applied at Helgate. He wasn't hired, but he went back home to the reservation. He was the Native American Teacher of the Year. 2 years ago, he won the Milliken Award for science. Now the science teachers use his curriculum. But he wasn't hired at home. If he wasn't good enough, who would be? I don't know. Reduce the boredom. There are a lot of programs like ACES and ABLE that are coming out, extracurricular activities. At Helgate, I think in all the sports, there are Native Americans now. Before, they were invisible. But now they have pride, they're involved. Some alternatives to suspension and detention. If we could have them work instead of having them sit in detention, catch up on their work. And at Helgate, they can come to the Native American Studies class and do their detention, and they can catch up on their work. Do I still have time?
You got it.
Okay.
You go.
Here is a plan I had, and I'll tell anybody that will listen. We all heard the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. What if we had a whole village watching out for people who are skipping school, absentees, turning them in? A businessman sees a student that should be in school, call him in if there was a number. It would reduce the crime. There would be more people there. Even if we could just keep them from walking around the halls. If there were some parents or somebody, because the teachers can't do that. They can sometimes, and they do that. But if there were some people there to keep them out of the halls, if the neighbors seen them, if they had a number to call in, if you're at Kmart, the checkout person asks you, why aren't you in school? If there was a number to call, it would reduce the violence, crime, free up the cops, the judge could go golfing. But it's just an idea. Because if you could reduce absenteeism, I tell the students, if you go to school every day, you'll pass. So if we could keep them in class, they'll pass. And one other thing is, I work with a lady named Nancy Lero. Is she here? She does a really good job. Whoever has taken Native American Studies for 4 years graduates. They have dreams, they have goals, they go on to do things. And they come back and shake our hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecil. That was very poignant.
Great to follow Cecil, because I agree with actually everybody here at the panel. First, I'd like to say that we did a needs assessment last spring that many of you participated in on at-risk youth, and education was right up there as one of the issues. And the youth responses to that, Dana's in the audience and she'll probably smile at this, was make more Willards. This is what the kids are saying, and that's what the panel's saying today, is that alternative high school idea really is what works for the kids that we're talking about today. I did a little research with clients as well as social workers in the community about why they think teenage parents drop out of school. And this is not against administrators, teachers, or counselors in my voice. I'm really speaking for our clients. They say counselors told them they need to leave their home school if they become pregnant, and that is actually a myth. The rural schools have no services for teen parents. Counselors and teachers telling them they should just drop out and get their GED. And nobody cared when they said they were going to drop out. So oftentimes they've told someone, I'm thinking about dropping out, this isn't working for me, that kind of thing. But nobody did anything when that happened. So what is lacking, in my opinion? I truly believe when someone's basic needs are not met, food, clothing, shelter, access to health care, transportation, the importance of school is nothing compared to being hungry or not having childcare, all those things we're talking about earlier. I believe there's a lack of consequences for both the students and the parents. You miss 10 days, you're kicked out. Whew, imagine why we have dropouts. That's a problem. Lack of parental responsibility to make their kids go to school. I remember hearing a police officer speak at a conference one time about how he got a call from a mom that said, my kid won't go to school, will you come and get him? And he laughed and said, is that really what our police should be doing, is coming and getting your kids to go to school? Parents need to get the kids to go to school. But if there's no consequence, there's no support system to help that parent do that, that keeps kids out of school. And then one of my biggest questions when we talk about what can we do is lack of communication. Who's supposed to follow up when students drop out of school? Right now at Mountain Home, do you know what we get? We get a voicemail that says so-and-so's not in school today. And after 10 of those, she'd be kicked out of school. Well, that's a problem in my opinion. When I was a social worker at Word and I did case management and did a lot of these things that I hear other people doing, where when somebody was at risk, we got a call. It was actually Mary Ann lots of years ago, where she would call and she'd say, we haven't seen Janie for a couple of days. Do you have any idea what's going on? Can you go to her house? Can you do some intervention? And that's the kind of work we got to do. And we got to have an actual impact on getting this kid back into school. And often it was a lot of the things we've talked about today, which is stigma and boredom and possibly drugs and alcohol, whatever it was. But a lot of times it was the basic needs. They don't have a way to get to school. The baby's been sick. Whatever the case may be, that having someone who can intervene before it's too late, before they're too credit deficient, before they get nagging letters in the mail and that kind of thing, that it's really about that human touch and having a connection for someone to say, I care and I want to get you back in school. And that can be a teacher, a counselor. I love Cecil's idea that the community takes some ownership in this and makes a call to someone. Who that someone is, I think, is the question, and who has the ability to go out there and do that. Our classrooms are full, our teachers are busy, our counselors' caseloads are outrageous, but somebody needs to have this as their job so that I can call, so that you can call, so we can respond when somebody's not going to school. We had a young mom at Mountain Home who walked down to her home high school and withdrew herself without our knowledge, without her parents' knowledge. I don't know what happened, and we thought she'd been going to school. And we got that little message and did some research and found out she actually hadn't been going to school for a couple of days. And blew my mind. I think it should be the opposite. We should have got a call day one. We haven't seen her. Well, come to find out, she withdrew herself from school. She was 16, but still, to me, that is a tragedy. We absolutely need to be communicating with each other and communicating with somebody so that we're doing some more prevention before they've dropped out and they're so credit deficient, and we're having to look at creative ways to get them back to school. Thank you.
Thank you, panel members. I guess I'm just reflecting on some of my own experiences. I was dubiously honored to be the K-8 attendance officer for about 15 years in part of my career. And you know, you never know what kind of impact you have on children, on families. And I had a young woman come up to me the other day and she said, I remember you, Ms. Moon. I remember that I was so angry at you because I had a hard time coming to school and you came one day and you walked in and I was still sleeping. Now, I would never do this in this day and age. But I said to her, you have 10 minutes to get your clothes on, brush your teeth, and then I'm going to take you to school. Well, she balked, and she balked, and she balked some more, so her mother and I promptly loaded her in my car in her pajamas with her toothbrush in hand and took her to school. And what she came up to say to me as a probably 21-year-old adult was, thank you so much for doing that. I was so angry. I was so embarrassed. but it really did have an impact on my life. I stayed in school and I completed school, and I often think of that incident. And I think that just, again, I wouldn't do that now probably, but I think it's the whole story about relationships, about students, about people taking ownership of this problem, about community services, about schools. And I want to say that the nicest thing about this Dropout Summit today was that the school district was approached not with a finger being pointed at us, but with an approach of what can we as a community do, let's talk about this, let's do some problem solving. I think Cecily had some wonderful concrete ideas. I'm kind of a concrete person, so I really liked some of your ideas. I have no idea what time it is because Rachel took my watch, but we have 9 minutes.
So it's 9 o'clock.
It's 9 o'clock. Oh, wow, we have about 30 minutes. So what I'd like to do now is just entertain some questions and some dialogue from the audience. So please stand up. It's hard to see you from up here, but please stand up and feel free to ask the panel any questions that you have.
Jesse, you mentioned, excuse me, you mentioned just kind of the necessity to have multiple intelligence curriculum, I guess. And my question is, how does that actually work for, does that actually prepare a student well for life? Because, as you look at the job, the workforce out there, it seems that most employers, they aren't giving jobs based on sort of a multiple intelligence model. And I guess just if you'd comment on how well you think that actually prepares students when they get out in the real world.
Great question. The way I look at multiple intelligence is that, again, when we look at linguistic and mathematical, logical intelligence, that's going to be a certain portion of our workforce. The work I do, I don't do any mathematical and logical intelligence. I don't use that at all. It's a good thing I don't have to. But I do a lot of interpersonal and intrapersonal intelligence. Some people are really good at looking at how their bodies are affected by things. Kinesthetic, right? And body spatial. Those are going to be the athletes, the dancers. Okay, so I think each of these intelligences you can find fitting in a different portion of our society as employed people. You look at a garbage worker, okay, a sanitation expert, all right? They don't really need linguistic intelligence and mathematical intelligence. That's a very important part of our culture to have that. What are they good at? Okay, they're probably really good with their body and their space and involving in that. You look at a pilot, okay? A pilot's not going to be, he's going to have he or she is going to have some mathematical intelligence and some skills in that area, but really good spatially. Artists, very good spatially. Okay, so I think each of these, and that's, I'm not going to mince words. High school sometimes is a joke for a lot of kids. I don't need math. That doesn't apply to me. I don't need this. I don't need that. Okay, but if you can hone in on what their strengths and their interests are, that's going to get them more committed to school and maybe lead them to a path where they can use those skills they already possess. Okay, if we're giving students, very narrow focus and narrow options on how to learn things and what works for people, they're gonna be more likely, I think, to push everything else away and not really utilize their strengths and not be able to discover strengths. And that's a really cool thing about, I think, multiple intelligences, is it allows people to find what they're good at. And it allows teachers to really have a lot more fun in the classroom. We can lecture on this, hey, and here's a chart about what I've talked about. Or, hey, why don't you make up a dance that expresses how you felt about Macbeth? Or write a poem, or write some piece of music. And those, I think, that's going to blossom in young people what they're interested in. And then in turn, they're going to use that in their daily lives. They're going to maybe become committed to going to college. Or say, I want to be a professional trapeze artist because I really realize I'm good at tumbling and these kinds of things. And I don't have any interest in math and language, but that's what I want to do. So I think that's, you look at a big proportion of our society of office work, and if those kinds of things, you look at teachers. Teachers are good at linguistic intelligence, right? They're really good at that. And some of them have other attributes they bring in. Art teachers are probably a little better at spatial intelligence. PE teachers, they have more of the kinesthetic and body type of intelligence. Natural intelligence. Some people really like to go out in the environment and gather data and look at things and how they affect bigger picture. Those are the foresters, the ecologists. You know, those are different kinds of science than just straight mathematical, logical intelligence. So I think it's an opportunity, again, not only to have teachers more committed and have more fun in the classroom, but really it gives students a wide variety of different methods to learn from and to use their strengths. When kids feel like they're good at something, like Cecil says, if they, you know, even in extracurricular, if they can feel confident at something, that's going to boost them. It's going to get them committed to school and make them better at what they do, and then probably blossom them to do something in that area later. Does that help?
Thanks. Yeah.
And if I could follow up, this natural intelligence, I think you have to take into consideration what we've learned about the brains of these kids and how they're developing, because they may eventually get math skills. But if they're using drugs and alcohol, those wires are not getting hooked up where they need to be hooked up. And there's no frontal capacity, no executive function working yet. So when we tell them in the court to do something, or the teacher tells them to do something, or their parents tell them to do something, and somehow they get diverted and don't do it, I think we have to appreciate what's going on with them as far as chemical involvement. They can be delayed 4 or 5 years, maybe 18 standing in front of you, but really 13. The brain keeps growing until age 22, so we have to be patient as well. And finding these things that they enjoy. We have weekend programming. We've had it for the last 13 years. We partner with Parks and Rec to give them experiences about climbing rocks, going skiing, things that I guess everybody's supposed to do here, but remarkably the kids in our system do not. They've never had that experience. We partner with Habitat for Humanity, giving them experience to work on a house being built, all those things, tying them into the community. At some point, hopefully their brains will get caught up to where they can appreciate something else in education. But tying them to community first is, I think, easier, and then as you work with them, you'll learn what aspects of intelligence they're better in.
And one more piece of, you know, he had mentioned the way that, you know, the adolescent brain works. There's a big, what they call kind of a culling experience going on in adolescence, where a lot of the brain actually starts falling back and dying off, and new synapses are grown and developed. And those synapses that are grown and developed are the ones that are used and the ones that are practiced. So if kids are sitting around doing drugs, playing video games, that's what their brain's going to grow around, right? So if you can find something, you know, to maybe learning, if that's what they're connected to, is learning of any kind, and those are synapses that are going to get kicked off, and then, hey, maybe then they'll be able to pick up math or other things later. But if we can get them focused in a productive manner while they're going through this stage of development, the brain's changing, and they're kind of, everything's, I mean, 22, 25, some people are saying even. Guys develop a little later than girls do. Don't hold it against us, right? but the girls typically 22. Some men say, you know, 25 is when the brain's fully developed. So if we can, throughout this period, really make that culling more like toward learning, development, and positive attributes, those are the things we're going to hold on to long term.
I just want to say the new 3 R's are relevance, rigor, and relationships, not reading, writing, and arithmetic. And we have some great Falls folks here today. Thank you for coming very much. And we're working on a joint project called Smaller Learning Communities to address some of the very issues in the high schools that our panel is talking about. So I just want you to keep that in mind. And with that, Anitra, did you have a question?
I do. One of my big pet peeves, and something that we've had a valiant team from Great Falls working on, are truancy laws. And I think our state is the biggest contributor to dropout rates by allowing our kids legally to leave school when they're 16. So for Judge Larson, where do you see the winds of change blowing as far as being able to address state laws as well as local community laws? Because we've struggled even locally to try to put some teeth into our laws of Great Falls where there's be some bite, put some accountability on parents. And it's just a hard-fought battle with not much ground being made.
We have at least one legislator here, and that's one venue that you can approach the issue, but the programs that are working, and the one I think that's working in Billings is working within the context of our existing state laws. There are programs that, and I think we have, our county attorney is in contact with some of the schools, and there are letters sent out. I think that's a good start. I think that following up on those letters with the families is something that needs to be done. And how that's done is a matter for this community to decide how to do it. Most of the time, although there's some events going on in the evening in schools, there's a lot of evenings when there's not things going on in schools. And there are schools around the country where parents are brought into the school, not into court, but brought into the school to work on plans with their children. Certainly, when I confront kids that aren't going to school, a colleague of mine gave me a hint, and that's to have the parent go with the child to school. And I've had a couple of them turn right around. Mom or dad is ordered by me. And under juvenile laws, I've got that authority. I don't need it. The legislature had the wisdom to give judges the ability to order parents in juvenile proceedings. So I tell them to go, and they risk contempt if they don't. And it's, on a small basis, I haven't changed the world, but I've got a couple kids going to college now that wouldn't have. They were dropping out, getting lots of MIPs, and not going to school, and now that's changed. My own personal sanction, if they really get me, is to come to that most severe of all punishment, judge's study hall, where they're missing school, they can come to my office and work, and do their chores. I mean, it's very individualized, but I think the concept is getting the community behind the need to have parents working with their child. And these are not sometimes very simple issues. These kids could have been subject to violence, domestic violence in the home, there could be severe mental health issues, but we don't find out about it. We start making that inquiry until we start talking to the family. And the earlier the better. By the time they're 17, they've already been in 3 placements and they're in detention. It's a pretty rough road to try to pave over. So the earlier the better. And I think everybody has notice of who these kids are, and where those families are, and what we need to do a lot earlier than when they're 17 and in detention. So I think there could be some things suggested by the legislature, but the community can also do some things differently and more intensely. And I haven't been to Billings to see their program. I want to, but the programs that were portrayed at the American Bar Association conference were in small communities, and they appear to be working. And I've talked to those judges, and they appear very supportive of those programs. And they don't involve sending kids to jail.
No pressure, Mr. Wanzam, but would you like to comment on that as the sole, is there Dave McAlpin or is there another legislator here? Oh, Dave, thank you. Would either of you care to comment on the legislative issue? So no pressure though.
I'm Dave McAlpin. I represent House District 94, and Bill Nooney and Tim Fury were both here, both representatives from Missoula. I don't sit on the Judiciary Committee, I sit on the Health Committee and the Tax Committee, so I don't recall the basic bills we've seen in the last 2 sessions, but it is my sense that there's concern in the legislature for dropout rates, so I think that we would be open to tightening those up if that's deemed best. The only caveat I would give you is that I'd be concerned about doing something that might risk the parents' jobs and income. I know it's important to have accountability, but I think at the core of a lot of these issues are economic issues and parents working several jobs, and I wouldn't think putting them in jail or some sort of severe punishment would help the situation. Thanks.
Which is the current law now.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Dave Wanson-Reed. I'll just follow up with what Dave had to say. Good ideas, being what they are, aren't enough to get a bill passed. For those of you that feel like something needs to be changed in the legislature, you need to start right now. Actually, the best time to start is when we adjourn. Try to get all the people together that don't share your point of view and try to figure out what exactly it is we can do so that we don't have unintended consequences and create further difficulties by changing a statute. So for those of you that have ideas, all of us, all of our delegation here in Missoula in particular, would like to hear from you right now to see if we can put something together that has a realistic chance of actually passing, or to find out if there are other things we can do without having to go to Helena and change the statute as has been mentioned here.
I guess I would like to know what the statute is, because I called when one of my children that had been in foster care or in a group home, returning home, did fine while she was on drug checks and things like that, that there was pretty tight parameters on her. As soon as she did that very well for, I don't know, 6 months or whatever it was, she got off that, then she just faltered. There was no checks and balances, nothing. And I called because I thought there would be a truancy thing. She wasn't going to school. She was 15 years old, freshman in high school. They said no. I called the school. I said, who do I need to call? No, you have to call the police. Then the parent has to make them go, or they have to call us. Well, this is a dysfunctional family. She doesn't know how to get. She said, how am I supposed to get her to school? Drag her? I don't have a car. I can't, and she won't. She's dysfunctional herself. So here's another child that's 15 years old that hasn't gone to school for 3 or 4 months, and she's not going to now. So what is the law? I mean, what can we do? I felt that there was nothing, and I'm supposed to be doing something. So I would like to know what is exactly what we can do.
Well, there's the possibility of educational neglect involving the Department of Family Services, and that can be reported. It's up to them to respond, and you're right, they don't always respond. There's the ability of the county attorney to send a letter to the family. That can be done, but again, the parents might not respond. There needs to be another step in there. And again, I think that can be done if we get the players together and agree on how to approach that, particularly with dysfunctional families and kids who are basically out on the street. But it's going to be a community agreement on what to do and how to handle it.
So my understanding of the current law, and please correct me, or does somebody else have a, Susan, you want to?
Sharon does.
Sharon does, please.
No,
Please do.
we've taken
Can you stand up, please?
past legislative sessions, bills trying to amend Trudy Smith has carried the bills for us, trying to amend the present fluency laws. And there are there's actually 3. There's the Department of Health and Family Services, but we get no support whatsoever as a school district, I think we would agree anyway, through through the Department of Family Services, because they're overloaded with their own, with other issues. So educational neglect is not, we don't get a response on that grounds. Then there's the school truancy section that says basically the schools, if a child is not where they're supposed to be during the school day, the school can contact those kids and use school consequences or school enticements, either way, to get children back in school. The law that we tried to address is the youth court law, which basically allows students to be out of school unexcused 10 full days per semester, which means that children can legally miss 20 school days per year. That doesn't count half days. That doesn't count excused absences. They can miss 20 school days per year before we get youth court or other agencies associated with youth court involved. And that's the part of the law that we tried to address in these 2 bills that we've carried, and I've spoken before the Senate at committees and House committees on this. And I certainly agree with Judge Larson, right, that punishment is really not the answer. And what we need is a reasonable balance
of coercion and enticement, and working together as a community, and the state really should be considered a community, and coming up with a reasonable process, and I've talked a lot and worked with the Billings people, come up with a reasonable process and law that advocates and is an interest in having children be able to leave school at 16 certainly is, worthy of discussion. Reasonable community statewide approach to this problem. And I know, I wouldn't be so arrogant as to say I know all the potholes involved in this, but I know a heck of a lot of them because I've fallen in them and am still debating, as to whether or not we want to try a third time to take a law that simply says, instead of 20 days unexcused absence, the courts get involved per year, the courts get involved at 10, and leave it at that, and see if maybe we can get something like that passed.
And I would say that even if we get involved in what do we do, and that takes us back to the community. And that's where I think the legislature would like to see the merits and the drawbacks and limitations of what's going on in Billings. And I think they'd have to hear that before they would get behind something. The youth court system has a lot less funding than CFS has. Kids sometimes are the same kids in both programs. So if they commit felonies or misdemeanors, we can order all of that to happen. And we don't have 100% success with our orders. We have more success with our programs. Those all cost money as well. As I understand, some of the successes in Billings is keeping those kids in school. That brings more funding to the school district and encourages them to keep this program going. At least that's what I've heard. But I think we get a lot more by planning locally initially and demonstrating some things. I think the legislature would be more inclined to invest in something that actually is on the ground working rather than a minor change to a statute that might have different impacts around the state.
And we do have a long-term community effort that's been, maybe 10 years in process in Great Falls. And I think we do have improvements in our truancy rates.
Can I mention one more thing? In response to the family we're talking about, I think we need to also always keep in mind that there are family strengthening activities that need to happen. And that mother who can't get her daughter to go to school probably has her own transportation barrier with no vehicle. And so services need to get into that home, educate mom, get mom some social support so that she can actually get on TANF or whatever it is that she may need, bus passes, that kind of thing. And I'm not saying you should be doing it. I'm saying that, yes, there are legal consequences and things we can do, but I take the other frame of reference, which is let's get this family stable so she can get her own kid to school.
Now at
rather
this
than
time,
involving.
DFS was involved, there was Admiral Youth Court involved.
So that stuff was in place
We
in that.
had lots of services, but the truancy just was kind of ignored. I mean,
I'd just like to follow up with Gypsy's point, though, and in my own experience, just tell you a story about a parent whose child didn't come to one of our middle schools continuously. The child didn't come, and so we worked with the county attorney, and we decided to take this one to court. And the statute says that you can fine the parent $50 or they can spend 2 nights in jail, which was like totally pointless. But we talked with the judge beforehand, and it was 30 below that day, and it was a grandmother that was raising her child. And bless her heart, the grandmother walked to the courthouse from another school area where it was several miles, and the principal and I were just sick that we didn't know that. We went before the judge, and we asked the judge if, in fact, he would just ask that the parent go to school with the child to get the child to come to school. And as it turned out, the grandmother came to school for the next 3 weeks, and we didn't ever see the child again. So I'm just trying to say, I think that there's legislative issues, certainly. I really want to dovetail on what Gypsy said. It's about parents, it's about relationships, it's about families. This grandmother tried her heart, tried everything she knew how to do, and really had no control over this middle school child. And so, again, I think legislation is really important. And Mr. Nooney, are you here as well? Did you say that, Dave?
He's stepping.
Okay. I just want to thank the legislators for listening to this today, because I do think that's a piece of it. But I think it's, again, demonstrative of how much more complicated the issue is. I'd also like to thank the Great Falls people for working on it. And I think we need to look as a state at looking at it collectively.
We have had a state coalition the last couple of sessions. Last session came out of the state judicial office. Forgotten the name of it now at this point, but actually was directed by the state.
Mr. Cheney?
Not to put you on the spot.
Would you stand up, please?
Not to put you on the spot, but you just told us that a while back you personally went and got a kid out of bed to get him to go to school. What has changed that we now have to get the legislature to get that kid out of bed?
Don't you love the lights?
I want to answer just one piece of that, and just in my experience. When I started in social work in 1994, there was an individual social worker in every high school. That's not the case anymore. And not that the job description included going to a house and getting a kid out of bed, but I think that's a good example of what social workers can do. And when that changed and it went to one social worker for all the schools, we saw a significant change in our relationship and communication and ability to make an impact in the school system.
And I just clarify that, Gypsy, that there's a half-time social worker at all 3 of our high schools and no social worker in the K-8 system.
So it's worse than I thought.
We already know how many of those kids are not getting out of bed in the morning. I mean, the numbers are there, but that's, we don't have those numbers in front of us. I think just getting those numbers and finding out how many Johnnies had to get out of the sack in the morning is going to wake a lot of people in the community up about how serious this is. And then perhaps we can take the next step of figuring out some things to do while Great Falls is working on the statewide level. You probably already know how many don't get out of bed each morning. We're not even there yet.
But are you somehow...
We will have some more information.
And actually, we have
later in the
people
program.
who go and get kids out of bed still, so maybe we don't understand the laws at our and pull kids out of bed and bring them to school. That's part of their job.
Are you prevented somehow from doing that? Either physically or legally?
I just have to be real candid with you, Mr. Cheney, and that is that I don't know that I would do it just because of the litigious nature of it at this point.
That's what I want.
So we'll read that tomorrow. Any other audience questions? Yes, Sherry.
I think at the heart of the matter is that the students don't come to school because there isn't somebody welcoming them at school, like you said, and knowing that they're missing, and that they feel welcome there, like many of you have said. It's about the relationships. Kids come to a place where they feel welcome, where they feel known, where they feel that somebody knows what their multiple intelligence is, what they're good at, what their passion is. And the smaller learning communities, I'm like a smaller learning community coordinator at Big Sky, we're working really hard to instill programs like the advisory program where students come in. We've begged for once a week for 45 minutes so we can get to know these kids a little bit better. And for the community to support us on that, on these types of movements, the smaller learning community movements, is huge. So that when you get those kids drug out of bed, that there's somebody saying, hey, when I come into my advisory and kids come in late, I smile at them and I say, I'm so glad you're here. Because I know that they don't really want to be there sometimes. And I have a really good attendance rate in my advisory. And I'm just one. And I know that it's not for every advisory. But when you have somebody smiling at you when you're late, saying, I'm glad you make it, instead of saying, where have you been? And not even knowing your name, not knowing what you're there for, is really, really important. Another way some community can support us is maybe investigating surrounding states and the situations that they have with their truancy. I've heard that Idaho, and I may not be correct on this, has a policy that students have to show ongoing attendance and good attendance for them to continue to drive. I was just speaking with a student yesterday, and she doesn't have a car, and she's 15, and she has some serious alcohol problems. And she is one of the smartest kids. She's by far the smartest kid in my advisory class. Her No Child Left Behind scores are way advanced. She's not attending a lot of her classes. She doesn't find the means of them. Her mom's working the same job at minimum wage for 21 years. What's going to keep this kid in school? Hopefully it's people like me and other teachers and other community members who are saying, I'm glad you're here, and not allowing them to get a license so that they can go somewhere else and get a job during the day at age 15. Those are two ways. If the community says, I'm not going to let 15-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds work during school hours, and I'm not going to let them drive so that they can get there, maybe they'll come to school, and maybe people who really do care and are passionate about students and having them there and teaching them will come.
Can I say that?
You bet.
When our students come to our class, we shake their hand when they come to the door. They showed up. The rest of their life, they're going to have to show up. For work, if you're married, wherever you do, you're going to have to show up. I know what they went through. A lot of them didn't have records, but they're there. So I shake their hand. It also lets me know if somebody's having a problem. I know what's going on. And then when they leave, I shake their hand again. I might not ever see them again. It's very important. We have good attendance in our class, but there are just some things that they can't overcome, that they need help. I don't know how many alarm clocks Ms. Lerner bought, but it works.
That's Cecil's a new social worker.
I'm just wondering, I hear a lot of discussion about what's going to keep the kids in school. It seems like the problem is that we're expecting you, Mary Ann, or the legislators to get these kids out of bed. And I guess I'm wondering what kind of support you think there needs to be for the families to support the kids to go to school in the first place, because there's issues of generational poverty, there's all kinds of issues that, the importance just really isn't there. If a parent has more than one kid and has, TANF requirements, or they have to go to their minimum wage job, or, and try and deal with their other kids, what is the parents' motivation? And how do we as a community support the parents to help them raise their children? Because like Cecil said, it does take a village to raise a child. And it seems to me that support for the family is really lacking, and it seems like it's a big gap. And how do we address that?
Did you ever hear the question?
Should I follow up on that?
Yes.
My name is Lisa Pate. I work for the Missoula Housing Authority. And in my experience, people come to our office and expect that they can just walk in the door and that we will hand them the keys to an apartment, not realizing that there's literally thousands of people on our waiting list and that it's a 2 to 3 year wait. And so my question is, as working with students in the school, what your opinion is on having, in a way, like a Scared Straight program, but an opportunity for agencies to come to the school and offer, maybe like Missoula Housing Authority, and get people signed up on our waiting list, or food stamps or welfare or AA, and people, just an opportunity for people to share stories with the students and let them know how long and hard of a trip it's going to be, if they're not in school, and that there are agencies that are working, to accommodate those individuals, but that it is a very tedious process that requires a lot of commitment in itself once you are out, to get back on track. So just the question, how do you feel about having a program like that would offer them those opportunities, but also perhaps let them see, if they haven't already, that going to be a lot harder than they think it is.
Can I just respond quickly to that, and that is just to tell you, we do have in our district, we do have family resource centers in the majority of our schools, and that's a great place for that kind of information to be dispersed.
I go to a street law class a couple times a year in high school in Hellgate and talk about what I do and give them an indication of, the positives and the negatives of the system. But I think that's one area where if you directly relate it to the students in a classroom setting, just your own life experience, the opportunities that are here in the community, they might take that into the Family Resource Center or follow up on it in some fashion. The scared straight approach generally doesn't work as far as changing, but I think providing information does, and treating them and giving them the opportunity to exercise responsibility does. And I'm sure there's a way that you can fashion your information and present it to the students who probably need to hear it and have some positive results.
I got one tiny piece too. I mean, teenagers are bulletproof. They really are. That happened to this person. I'm not that person. It'll never happen to me. It's a core belief by a lot of young people. I mean, look at the drug campaigns we've had over our history as a culture. Drugs are bad. Your brain on drugs. Okay, Montana's second in the nation for rates of use of substances. Missoula County is their first or second in the state. Okay, we're using alcohol at a phenomenal rate and drugs at a phenomenal rate. Our sophomores drink at the rates that seniors do across the rest of the nation. So you got to look at that. Like, there is campaigns, there have been campaigns for decades about the dangers of drug use, and it still happens. So I think he's right. Part of the whole idea that being scared straight, I don't think teenagers don't ever buy into that. They're bulletproof, they're individual, never happened to me. But really providing them opportunities that, hey, here are some things you can go access. I think it's a great opportunity. Or I'm a 25-year-old addict, and this is kind of briefly my story. Here's what I could have done in order to prevent that from happening. Here are the resources I missed out on. Here's the commitments I missed out on. It could have been in football. It could have been in track. I could have done this. I could have done that. And I didn't. Here's what happened. So it kind of takes that whole idea of, like, this is going to happen to you too, but more of, here are the things, here are the positive things I could have done with my life. So some of those things can be really intertwined, but if it's kind of like the whole scared straight model, I think teens really don't buy into that very well.
We're running out of time, so we'll take one more question. You in the corner under the light.
I just wanted to add to the comment about students feeling welcome in schools. I also think it's really important that families feel welcome, and it's very important that we remember that many families didn't, or individuals or parents did not have good experiences themselves, and so it really is our responsibility when we're looking at, what's inviting to families, in a school system, that it's very important to keep that in mind as well. It's good to welcome students, that's very important, but let's also welcome their families.
Thank you. This was a great discussion. I know there weren't answers to some of the questions posed because I'm not sure there are answers. I'd like to thank the panel very much for taking their time, and we could give them a round of applause. I'm supposed to introduce Jim Clark. Has anybody, is he here?
He's here.
He's out there. Now, all I need to do is put a chocolate basket up here and I would get his attention. So maybe somebody...
We're getting in there, Ann.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Naomi, that was you that made that.
He's coming.
I brought the chocolate, that's what I have the chocolate. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jim Clark, who is the superintendent of our schools, and to tell you that he's a short-termer. He will be gone in a few months. He's done a wonderful job at addressing student needs and some of our faculty needs, and I'd just like to give a warm welcome to Jim Clark.
Thank you, and thank you, Mary Ann. She said chocolate, and one of the things that Trudy is responsible for, my executive secretary, is making sure I don't get out of the office without my shoes on. If there's somebody in the office beside Mary Ann, the chocolate gets me into her office, so we talk frequently. It is my privilege and pleasure this morning to introduce to you Rob Watson. Rob was born and raised in Montana, graduated from high school in Great Falls, CMR, received his BS from Montana State Bozeman. It says here, go Cats, but I'm not sure I can say that without also reminiscing a little bit, remembering, I think, when Rob's first daughter was born here, that somehow she was branded with the grizzly paw. Have a chance to talk to him about that sometimes, just do for fun. Rob started his education career as a math and science teacher in Anchorage, Alaska. In 2001, he and his wife Heidi moved to Missoula. And then after serving as principal at Rattlesnake and C.S. Porter Middle School, Rob was appointed, my privilege to appoint Rob as the principal at Sentinel High School in 2005. In his free time, with a wife and 2 daughters in the high school to manage, Rob enjoys reading, attending Sentinel events, and spending time with his daughters Emma, 5, and Isabel, 2. In addition, he's currently working towards his doctorate in educational leadership at the University of Montana. Would you please join me in welcoming Rob Watson?
Thanks a lot. I appreciate you being here. Can the folks in the back hear me okay? Got the thumbs up from Mr. Fuller, so it must be all right. I was hoping that this would show up a little bit better, so I'm hoping we can kill some of the lights up here so you can see that a little better. Is that possible?
Go ahead, cat guy.
Not by me, unfortunately.
Rob, I'll see you in fun.
While they're working on that, I'll get started with kind of the opening thing that I like to do with folks. These are called up-downs, and for those of you that have seen this before, you've experienced this, all I'm going to ask you to do is stand up if the statement that I read applies to you. It's very, very easy. Stand up if you were born in Montana. This helps because it gets the blood flowing so that we're thinking about what we're going to talk about. All right, have a seat. Stand up if you're born in another state. All right, and last one, stand up if you were born in another country. Great. All right, stand up if you're planning a trip for spring break. Okay, let's see. Stand up if you're planning that trip to someplace warm outside of Montana. Thank you. This is my favorite. Stand up if you're an Elvis fan. And I don't mean Elvis Costello. I mean the original Elvis. I have to preface that because last time I did this, several of the younger generation stood up and they thought I was talking about Elvis Costello. Stand up if you're an Elvis fan. You've been to Graceland. Remain standing, please.
I'm dating myself.
This is always interesting because sometimes people don't stand up when I say Elvis fan, but they stand up when I say Graceland. So I have to ask myself, why'd they go to Graceland if they're not an Elvis? Stand up if you had an Elvis sighting. I too have had an Elvis sighting. I'll tell you about that later if we have time. Stand up if you graduated high school in Montana. All right. Remain standing if it was in Missoula. Okay. Mr. Hire, second high school, right? Oh, thanks. All right, have a seat. Stand up if you graduated from a small class, less than 30 students. Okay, and how about stand up if you graduated from a large class, more than 300? Stand up if you graduated in the 50s. Okay. Yeah, there might have been others there. The graduation rate in the 50s was about 60%. The completion rate was about 60%. Stand up if you graduated in the early 60s. All right. Graduation rate was about 70% in the early 60s. I'm sorry, 60% in the early 60s. This is kind of a magical year. Stand up if you graduated in 1969. Do we have any graduates of 1969? Yes! this was magical year because this is our highest percentage completion rate we've had. 77% of students graduated in 1969. Does anyone know why that was the highest completion year? Yes, ma'am. All right, stand up if you graduated in the 70s. In the 70s, the graduation rate was falling. Remember I said high as 77%, it was falling. It was in the mid-70s in the 70s. Stand up if you graduated in the 80s. Oh, excuse me. Okay, the mid-80s graduation rate was 73%, still falling. And then last one I wanted to stand up if you graduated after, either during 1995 or after 1995 from high school. All right, graduation rate has remained steady since 1995. Nationwide, our graduation rate is about 70%. It's remained fairly steady since 95. Stand up if a member of your family, immediate or extended, had dropped out of high school. Okay, and then remain standing if that person completed through a GED. Completed through a GED. Okay, last one, stand up if you would consider yourself a first-generation high school graduate or a first-generation college graduate. Great. Give those folks a hand. The clicker's not working. Matt here? Oh, it's because I have to turn it on. I'm sorry. Let's try that. There we go. I'm just going to talk about a few things today. I'll try to stay within the time limit because I understand we have a break after this and we don't want to miss our break. We're going to talk about how bad the problem is, what the problem does create for society and for the community. How does Missoula compare? I also have some statistics from Great Falls for the folks that are here from Great Falls. We're going to talk a little bit about what causes dropouts and what are some of the solutions. How many have heard 1/3 of a nation? Raise your hand if you've ever heard that before. The problem is, you'll hear that a lot in the media. 1/3 of our nation is not graduating high school. Remember I said the completion rate was about 70% nationwide. And that's remained fairly steady since 95. So that's where they get the 1/3 at. This first data I'm going to give you is from census data. This is how the census data worked. In 1990, when they did the national census, they counted the number of 17, 18-year-olds in the country. And they also counted the number of 17 and 18-year-olds that had a diploma. And they just divided the two, got a ratio. So in 1990, the graduation rate was higher than that. It was 72%. So by 2000, they did the same thing, and it dropped to 69.6%. The lowest state in the nation was Arizona with a 55% completion rate, and the highest was Vermont. I think they had 88%. Montana was 13th overall at 79%. That doesn't sound too bad. Remember I said the graduation rate is 70% nationwide. Montana in 2000 was 79%. Doesn't sound too bad. 13th overall if you stack all the states 1 to 50. The problem is that rate has dropped quite a bit from 90 to 2000. In 1990, the graduation rate in Montana was 89%. So by 2000, it had dropped to 79%. That was a decline of almost just over 10% actually, if you look at the decimals. There were only 10 states that declined more than 8%, and we were one of the 10. In fact, if you stack us up against the other states, Montana was the 4th worst in terms of declining rates from 90 to 2000. Historically, graduation rates, and I know the numbers are very, very small, but on the left-hand side of here we have 1870. At 1870, the completion rates was about 4%. Then if you go across, you see 1969 is about the middle, that was at 77%. Then, as I said, it steadily declined. There was a low point in 1998 with 68%, and ever since 95, it's been about 70%. I'd like you to imagine for just a minute that we are all 16 to 19-year-olds. For some of us, that's easier to imagine that. But you all probably know 16 to 19-year-olds, so you know what I'm talking about. 2003, 1.1, 16 to 19-year-olds were not in school and had not yet received a diploma. If I could, I'd like everybody in these first 4 rows to stand up. If you turn around and face the rest of the audience, that would really help. Thank you. So imagine again that we're all 16 to 19-year-olds. Remember I said the completion rate was about 70%. These are the folks, including myself, if I count myself in this number, we're the folks that did not complete high school. We're not in school right now. We're about 1/3 of the nation right here. Okay? So if I could get these folks in this row to sit down. The reason they get to sit down is because even though they haven't completed high school and they haven't got a diploma, they're not in school, these are the 16 to 19-year-olds that are currently working. So that helps a little bit. These other folks here, these are the 16 to 19-year-olds that are not working. So they're not contributing, in a sense, to what we all want to contribute to society. Okay, and then, let's see.
Get a job, Marilyn.
See, the folks right over here stay standing, or everyone else sit down. Can you stand? You're not up there yet. This last group, this is the 40% of the 60% that's not working, but they're also not looking for work. The reason they're not looking for work is because they found alternate sources of income. And speaking of that, just kind of leads into what I was going to talk about. The alternate sources of income, that's a wear on our society. $24 billion for every class of dropouts, $24 billion for welfare crime, $2 billion lost in earnings and tax revenues. If you look at the current prison population in America, 75% of them do not have high school diplomas. If you drop out of high school, you're 3.5 times more likely to be arrested, and you have a 2.5 times higher death rate than those that did complete. One thing that I found very interesting, we talked a lot about the justice system a little while ago, getting the legal system involved. As you know, recidivism is something we all look at. It's is a kid going to go to jail? When he gets out of jail, is he going to have more problems legally? In order to reduce that rate, the one thing that we can do, the thing that reduces it the most, is teach folks how to read. Make sure that they leave prison with the skills to read. It actually reduces the chance they're going to be a repeat offender by 20%. These are $2002. We always want to compare apples to apples when we look at this data. So that first one's kind of striking, but in 1971, a dropout could earn $35,000, but in 2002, that same dropout could only earn $22,000. Now those are all in 2002 dollars, so you can compare those two ratios, or those two salaries. And that's a drop of 35% over that time. Folks often ask why that's dropped. It's a change in our workforce. 71, there was a lot more manufacturing jobs, well-paying manufacturing jobs in the United States. By 2002, the majority of jobs are service industry jobs. Those jobs don't pay as high. So if you don't have a high school diploma, you're faced with that kind of statistic. And the numbers on here are fairly small. I don't expect you to read them, but I do want to show you this comparison chart. If you look over at the far right, those are the 40-year gain, which means over a lifetime of 40 years of work, these are the gains that people make if they have a diploma. So if you look at the first one, that's almost $400,000, $370,000. So somebody that gets a high school diploma can actually earn $370,000 more dollars in their lifetime than somebody that does not have a high school diploma. An associate's degree is $620,000, and a bachelor's degree is $1.1 million more than a high school dropout in a 40-year time. So that does impact folks and our society. Raise your hand if you knew that there was a debate going on about the high school graduation rate. One of those real exciting presidential debates that we're all interested in. No, not really. The high school graduation debate is out there. There's two different ways to calculate it, and that's the debate process. And folks always say, well, it's not fair because you're looking at this or you're looking at that. There's basically two different ways. What I will tell you is both methods pretty much come up with the same thing nationwide. You're going to see different pockets of things from state to state or community to community, but the two main things come up with basically 70% completion rate. The first one is, I already mentioned, is the census data, and the second one is called the Common Core data. That's what our state uses, where it basically looks at a cohort group of kids over 4 years. It figures out how many of those kids dropped out when they were 9th graders, 10th graders, 11th graders, 12th graders. All of those count towards your completion rate. So those are the two methods. There are some flaws in these methods. They only account for on-time graduation. If you look at 2 years after on-time graduation, the rate goes up to 82%. That means there's a lot of folks out there completing with a GED. Also, the other major flaw is that the 9th grade data includes those that are retained. Nationwide, there's approximately 13% more 9th graders than there were as 8th graders the previous year. 13% is a big number. Those are the number of kids that are retained in the 9th grade because they haven't earned enough credits to become 10th graders. So using the true 9th grade numbers, if we take out those that are retained, then the rate is 79%. I'm not going to go into this a lot, but that's the graduation formula for the state. Interesting formula, to say the least. I did want to spend a little bit of time on this, graduation rates, state and local. Communities on the right-hand side, Great Falls, Bozeman, Billings, Butte, Montana average, Helena, Missoula, Kalispell. These are in 2005. This is a snapshot from 2005. So again, you can look at any year or look at a series of years to do this. What's interesting about these 7 communities, those 7 communities, which I'm going to call the AA school districts, educate nearly 50% of the students in Montana. So it is important to look at this data because it does affect a lot of students. Great Falls, you can see in 2005, Great Falls was at the top, so congratulations to Great Falls. 88.9%. Missoula was second from the bottom, 82.3%. The Montana average was 84.8%. I mentioned earlier that these numbers vary greatly, and let me just give you a little piece of information. In 2004, Missoula was number 2 on this list. So 2005, we dropped down to number 6. Typically, the districts or the communities you find at the top are Great Falls and Billings. Another interesting point about variation, if you look where Butte is, Butte's right above the state average at 85.2%. The previous year, they were 70%. They were a full 15% below that. So that just shows you a little piece about how varied the data is. You probably need to look across several years to get a good picture. We're going to talk probably more today, and I heard a little bit this morning already about who's to blame. Why is this a problem and who is to blame? How many, raise your hand if you've heard this before. What's the matter with kids today? Yeah, how many have said that before? Raise your hand if you've said that before. Yeah. I'd like to read you a little piece of a report that I came across in my research. And just listen for a minute and tell me what you think this means. We report to the American people that while we can take justifiable pride in what our schools and colleges have historically accomplished and contributed to the United States and the well-being of its people, the educational foundations of our society are presently being eroded by a rising tide of mediocrity that threatens our very future as a nation and a people. What was unimaginable a generation ago has begun to occur. Others are matching and surpassing our educational attainments. That statement could be summed up in that question I said, what's the matter with kids today? That's that statement right there. The problem with that statement is it was written 20 years ago. 20 years ago, in the mid-'80s, as part of that report, A Nation at Risk. So once again, let me ask this. Can those that graduated in the mid-'80s, would you please stand? Thank you. Remain standing for just a second. We report to the American people that we have a rising tide of mediocrity. Our society is presently being eroded. The threatens our very future as a nation and a people. These are the people this statement was written about. Doesn't feel very good, and I can go ahead and have a seat. Thanks. Doesn't feel very good to hear that, a statement that's written about you. What I can tell you, since the mid-1980s, SAT tests, our National Assessment of Educational Progress tests, those scores have all risen since 1980. So they haven't fallen. We're not experiencing this rising tide of mediocrity. It's a little political, I understand that, but what I want to tell you is that when we say that statement, what's the matter with kids today, there's really nothing the matter with kids today. They're actually doing better than we did even in the mid-'80s. A problem with the system. If you ask teachers and parents and students, they all agree that there's a problem with the system, but they're going to disagree on what the reason is or what the problem is. If you ask teachers, why is there a dropout problem, you're going to hear that the kids are coming to us from middle school lacking incoming skills, they lack work habits. Raise your hand if you're a middle school person here. I know we had a few in the room. I'm an old middle school person, so I feel for you because I hear this. I heard this all the time as a middle school person. Kids are coming in with incoming lacking skills and work habits. You know what some teachers would say, not all teachers, but some teachers would say that the problem is that we need to stop social promotion. We need to stop promoting kids that aren't ready for high school. We need to retain kids in middle school or in elementary school for that matter. The problem with that statement, nearly 7 times more likely to drop out, especially if kids are retained after the age of 10. If they're retained in school after the age of 10, they're 7 times more likely to drop out of high school when they get to the high school. So there's a problem with that. Retention sounds like a good idea, but it doesn't necessarily work. Parents would tell you, and we heard a little bit of this already, parents would tell you that the kids are falling through the cracks. Our system is too large, there's holes in our system, there's no checks and balances, kids are falling through the cracks. That's what parents would say. Probably the most interesting, and we'll hear probably more of this later, but what the students would say. In a national survey, these are the top 5 reasons why kids said they dropped out of high school. Number 1, they did not like school. Number 2, they were failing classes. Number 3, they couldn't get along with their teachers. Number 4, they couldn't keep up. And number 5, they felt like they didn't belong. 3 out of those 5 statements that I just said are related to school connectedness. How important we value our students as they come into school. Just a couple other things. These are precursors for dropping out. Low grades, low attendance rate, higher graduation standards. That's an interesting one that hasn't come up today, but No Child Left Behind has placed some higher graduation standards. Income gap, problems at home, retention. I mentioned those already. I want to talk real briefly about the, thanks Lisa, 5 minutes. I want to talk real briefly about the freshman failure. Freshman failure is a significant predictor for dropping out. And that's why if you talk to some of the folks in the school system that are involved in the Smaller Learning Communities grant, there's a heavy focus on freshmen. And that's why, it's because it's a significant predictor. If they're on track at the end of 9th grade, they're 3.5 times more likely to finish in 4 years. What does on track mean? On track means that they're passing their core classes. If a student fails a few of their core classes, they're more likely to drop out. And the failure happens in the freshman year. Most students who drop out, the majority of students who drop out, leave with fewer than 5 credits. 5 credits is still a freshman. So they could be in their sophomore year, their junior year, their senior year. They're leaving school with less than 5 credits, which means they never really got past the 9th grade. I mentioned this earlier about school connectedness. This is very important that you understand this, especially since I know that there's a lot of folks in the audience that work with at-risk behaviors, student at-risk behaviors, children at-risk behaviors. Again, national survey, the number one thing that prevented at-risk behaviors in youth was school connectedness. So all the other programs that we have in place already, they help, but this one helped the most, school connectedness. Schools that have done a really good job with this will recommend a pyramid of support. I can tell you a story about a school in Chicago that implemented a pyramid of support, and a great success story. But in that pyramid of support, they provide more transitional students as students go from 8th grade to 9th grade. They provide a structure for those that are struggling in the 9th grade, and they provide a system of monitoring, intervention, and recovery. Again, all these things came up already this morning from folks you heard this, is that we need a system of monitoring and intervention. Schools have a piece of this, the community also has a piece of that. I'm going to leave you just with this thought. We continue to talk about why students drop out of school. There's lots of factors involved. We've heard some this morning. You'll hear more this afternoon. As educators and as community members, if we continue to believe that they drop out for non-educational reasons, there's family problems, they can't get to school, they have legal problems, those are all things that we don't produce as educators. We feel like we can't influence, and as a result, we feel like we're not accountable to the dropout problem. The fact is that there have been schools in the nation that have influenced, have made changes, and have produced better graduation rates. So I guess the question I leave with you, I told my staff this 2 weeks ago, do we believe all students can graduate or should graduate? Hopefully by now, once you've seen some of the economic statistics, you believe that all students should graduate. And then if they don't, what are we prepared to do as a community or a school when they don't graduate? So with that, I open it to questions.
I understand there's going to be, and maybe there already is, a database of student records where you'll be able to track students better throughout either the entire state or is it the entire nation?
Yeah, the state has implemented a statewide student identifier. So if a student leaves Sentinel High School and goes to Havre, that student identifier goes with them. So what happens a lot of times when they leave Sentinel is we don't necessarily know where they go unless we get a request for records. But with this identification system, we can actually see, yes, they enrolled in another school, so we don't have to count them as a dropout in our school.
So will that increase your ability to track dropouts, I guess?
You know, we have one person on staff that does a great job with our dropout report, and he's a great investigator. He searches out and tries to figure out where these kids went. So we already do a pretty good job, and I think any school will tell you that. You need to have somebody on staff that will track that really closely. But it will help. I think it probably will increase graduation rates a little bit just because we'll be able to figure out where the kids went to.
Will that system track K through 8 also, or is it just high school?
It's my understanding that all students are given an identifier, even K through 8 students.
Rob, you say that there's a conversation going on about the two different formulas that using that to drive graduation rate. Do you see anything coming from that that might get rid of some of the flaws with that method and something come up that's a little more viable?
Let me go back, or if I can, to try to answer that. Let me take a minute here. The graduation rate in the state, the formula, the problem with our current graduation formula is all that stuff that's on the right-hand side of that formula is a divisor. So what that is, like folks that complete high school by other means, even the students that complete by other means, we have to include those as dropouts. They're counted as dropouts. So there's a problem with our graduation formula. I think this is fairly similar to what's in other states. There's probably better ways to do this, but this is what we have right now.
Rob, I'm from the Office of Public Instruction, and actually this formula has to be approved by the federal government. We don't have as much oversight over probably including certain particulars as we would like.
Thanks. Yes, ma'am.
We notice, or we heard, that there's a lot of kids drop out between 8th and 9th grade, and they're dropouts still, and I'm the counselor at Willard. I get a lot of telephone calls from parents whose kids haven't been in school since 4th grade, and now they feel that it's time for them to go back to high school. They have so many holes that there's nothing set up to help those kids. And the other thing is a lot of states provide funding for their kids to go through, and they're not special ed kids, funding for their kids to go until they're 21 years old. And in Montana, they can only go through their 18th year unless they turn 19 after September 10th. And we all don't mature at the same age. And so we're saying, yeah, the light bulb went on for this kid at 18, but he's going to be a dropout because there's nothing there for him.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments?
Well, just what she said is so important, saying that this, young woman or man has not been in school since 4th grade. And I think it just really illustrates how it's such a community problem, that it's not a high school problem. It's, you can look at kids' attendance records from 2nd grade and you can predict dropout. So it is such a huge systemic problem that we all have to be looking at as a community, in every state.
We got 1 minute left. Anything else?
Do you see a correlation between Missoula County not having a gifted program kind of playing and dropout?
I can't answer that specifically. I will tell you that in looking at the research nationwide, more and more kids are taking the GED as an option. The GED was designed for a lot older kids, and now it's being taken by kids that are a lot younger. The average age of the GED, kids taking the GED, has dropped quite a bit. And I think that might speak a little bit to what you're talking about. The kid that probably could graduate high school, probably could do a great job, but they want to go on to college quicker, and so they take the GED.
My name is Lacey. I'm from the United Way, and I'm new to not only Missoula but Montana, so I have a question for the community. What are we doing as a community to include young people in this conversation of finding a solution, as they're key stakeholders in this epidemic as well?
Well, in this initial conversation that we're having today with the community, which is really one of the first conversations that we've tried to have with so many different folks in the community, we're actually having a youth panel after the break, which is a perfect segue for me. To let you know, first of all, I want to thank you, Rob, for such a great presentation. And one way that we're going to include youth in this conversation, and they've been having some very interesting reactions already, just listening to what people had to say. So I can't wait to hear more from them. When you come back in exactly 10 minutes, all of you have used the restroom and had a cup of coffee, then find yourself a seat, and we're going to have a quick, very brief presentation by Mandy Broadus from OPI, and then our youth will join us on stage. Thanks.
First part of the 20th century.